Guess who's back? Chaotic noise, unyielding intensity, pure sonic dissonance. If you stuck with us this far, buckle up, because Tier 6 Part 2 is about to redefine unsettling. The albums in this section veer into extreme experimentation and uncompromising chaos, testing not just your musical tastes, but your tolerance for challenging sounds and ideas. If you've missed any earlier tiers, you can find them in the playlist linked down below. For now, brace yourself. These albums are notorious for pushing boundaries and conjuring uneasy atmospheres. From abrasive production to haunting themes, Tier 6 Part 2 showcases some of the most relentless music you'll ever encounter. Let's begin our trek through these albums and see what lies in the depths of this iceberg. Atrax Morgue was the moniker of Italian noise artist Marco Corbelli, active primarily during the 1990s and early 2000s. Corbelli found the label Slaughter Productions, which specialized in power electronics, noise, and industrial music. He was deeply influenced by themes of death, murder, and mental pathology. The fascination with dark subject matter can be traced through nearly all of his works, and Paranoia is a clear example of how he channeled those preoccupations in his sonic experiments. Released in the mid-90s, Paranoia immediately established itself as one of the quintessential releases in the power electronics genre. The album is composed of harsh, repetitive electronic pulses, heavy feedback, and sparse vocals that range from distorted whispers to agonizing shouts. Unlike some other noise artists who focus on chaotic barrages of sound, Corbelli often employed stark minimalism in his compositions. On Paranoia, this is evident in the way he isolates certain frequencies or loops, letting them run just long enough to induce genuine discomfort before layering in additional elements. The overall effect is a suffocating sense of dread that lives up to its title. Corbelli's thematic fixations often included medical imagery, autopsy reports, and serial killer lore. While these motifs could be considered sensational, they were more than mere shock tactics. He viewed them as a window into the darker edges of human consciousness. Paranoia is emblematic of that approach. Samples, if present, can feel clinical and detached, yet the dense waves of feedback heighten a sense of psychological claustrophobia. It's this contrast, almost sterile sound fragments against waves of near unbearable electronic intensity that helped define Atrax Morgue's work. In his personal life, Corbelli was known to struggle with depression. Tragically, he died by suicide in 2007, leaving behind a body of work that remains influential within experimental music circles. His death adds a somber note to listening sessions, as it underscores how these recordings might have been more than abstract exercises in transgression. They could be seen as personal exorcisms or revelations. Though Paranoia does not present a linear narrative, Corbelli's mental and emotional battles can be felt in the album's oppressive atmosphere, giving it an unsettling authenticity. Critically, Paranoia is often cited by fans of power electronic and noise for its raw, unfiltered approach to production. There's a deliberate rejection of conventional musical structure. No melodies, no clear song progressions, and virtually no respite. This places Paranoia firmly in the realm of extreme electronic music, but it also grants it a certain punity of form that many later noise artists look to for inspiration. It's harsh, unapologetic, and deeply singular in its vision. Despite its intensity, or perhaps because of it, Paranoia has become a touchstone for those studying the broader noise genre. From its minimalist artwork to its unyielding sound design, it conveys a fascination with humanity's darker impulses. Listening to it is by no means easy. It demands both mental and emotional stamina, yet it also offers a perspective on how sonic art can delve into taboo or unsettling territory without succumbing to outright sensationalism. Instead, it stands as an honest, if disturbing, reflection of one artist's exploration of extreme emotion and psychological unease. Kevin Drum is a Chicago-based experimental musician whose work spans free improvisation, electroacoustic composition, and noise. During the 1990s, he became recognized for his innovative guitar techniques, which he amplified and distorted through various electronic devices. Over time, his sound evolved to encompass the more abrasive elements of power electronics and drone, blending textural density with moments of haunting minimalism. By the early 2000s, he had already carved out a niche for himself in experimental music circles, but Sheer Hellish Miasma, released in 2002, elevated him to a new level of prominence within the noise community. When discussing Sheer Hellish Miasma, it's important to note the album's sheer intensity. Unlike Drum's earlier releases, which often featured guitar as a recognizable instrument, albeit twisted beyond its typical boundaries, the record dives deeper into the realms of abstract electronic chaos. Layers of harsh feedback, grinding low-end frequencies, and piercing high tones collide to form an ever-shifting wall of sound. Rather than building towards a melodic resolution, each track plunges listeners into a swirling mass of noise that oscillates between suffocating heaviness and near silences, punctuated by bursts of static or feedback. Despite the overwhelming sonic aggression, there's a meticulous sense of craft at work here. Drum leverages carefully controlled dynamics to create movement within the chaos, sporadic crescendos giving way to quieter passages, drawing the listener's attention to subtleties in texture and tone. The result is a complex interplay between randomness and structure. It never quite feels aimless, but it also resists typical musical signposts, such as traditional rhythms or recognizable chord progressions. From a historical perspective, Sheer Hellish Miasma landed at a moment when noise and experimental music were gaining broader recognition outside of the underground circles. Labels like Mago championed forward-thinking electronic composers, and Drum's work fit perfectly within that milieu, sitting comfortably alongside with other artists who sought to expand their boundaries of sound art. Critics and fans alike took note of its uncompromising approach, many regard it as a high watermark in the noise scene for its unrelenting intensity paired with a sense of purposeful composition. In the years since its release, Sheer Hellish Miasma has continued to influence noise musicians and experimental composers who strive to push the envelope of sonic expression. It stands not just as a testament to Drum's technical abilities, but also as a demonstration of how raw noise can be harnessed into a form of deliberate, if challenging, musical art. Through carefully sculpted distortion and a willingness to explore extreme sounds, Kevin Drum used this album to make a definitive statement about the outer limits of what a noise record could be. Lucrian is an experimental trio formed in Chicago, known for blending elements of black metal, drone, noise, and dark ambient into a uniquely atmospheric sound. At the core of the group are Andre Foisy, Terrence Hunnam, and in later developments, Stephen Hess. Over the years, they've cultivated a reputation for darkly immersive music that transcends easy genre classification. Their album The Crystal World, released in 2010, is widely regarded as one of their defining works, both for its layered sonic landscapes and the thematic depth it explores. Conceptually, the album takes inspiration from J.G. Ballard's novel The Crystal World, a story where a jungle environment is gradually transformed into crystal formations. This literary backdrop underscores Lucrian's ability to fuse bleak, post-apocalyptic imagery with haunting musical textures. Across the record, the band builds expansive soundscapes by combing sustained guitar drones, pulsating synthesizer tones, and distant vocals. From the opening moments, the listener is immersed in a forbidding atmosphere, one where melody is secondary to the enveloping weight of texture and mood. Unlike straightforward metal albums, The Crystal World relies on tension and gradual development. The band often uses repetition and subtle shifts to evoke a sense of inevitability, mirroring Ballard's tale of an unstoppable crystalline takeover. Moments of relative quiet might highlight the hum of an oscillator or the faint crackle of feedback, only to be overtaken by dense layers of distortion and percussion that feel almost suffocating. The effect is cinematic. Each new section seems to reveal another facet of the band's sound, much like the novel's world slowly calcifying into otherworldly structures. One of the hallmarks of Lucrian's approach is the interplay between dark ambient passages and bursts of black metal-inspired aggression. The Crystal World balances these extremes carefully, never veering into standard riff-based metal for long, yet never losing sight of its metal roots. Tracks can evolve from sparse droning hums into swirling cacophonous peaks, filled with saturated guitar fuzz and howling vocal layers. This dynamic approach keeps the album engaging throughout its lengthy runtime, ensuring the listener remains on edge, anticipating the next shift in mood. Critics and fans alike have lauded The Crystal World for its ability to navigate the intersections of multiple experimental genres. By drawing on drone, noise, and metal, Lucrian carved out a distinct creative identity, one that would influence other artists aiming to bridge the gap between ambient soundscapes and extreme metal. The album stands out as a testament to the power of thematic cohesion, illustrating how literature and music can intersect to create an immersive, thought-provoking journey. For anyone exploring the deeper, darker recesses of experimental metal, The Crystal World remains an essential listen. Revenge is a Canadian extreme metal band that emerged in the early 2000s, often classified under the war metal or bestial black/death umbrella. The group was initially formed by James Reed, a drummer and vocalist who had previously been involved with the influential band Conqueror. Revenge's sound is characterized by relentlessly fast drums, harsh vocals, and a deliberately chaotic production style that pushes aggression to its limits. Over the years, the band has seen a few lineup changes, but the one constant has been Reed's guiding vision, defined by its hostility towards musical conventions and its brutal interpretations of black/death metal tropes. Behold Total Rejection, released in 2015 on Season of Mist, is a prime example of the band's confrontational aesthetic. From the moment the first track begins, it's clear that any notion of accessibility has been stripped away. Guitars are tuned low and layered to produce a savage, guttural roar. Drums are at times so rapid that they devolve into waves of continuous blast beats. Meanwhile, the vocals range from deep animalistic growls to harsh barking proclamations. The overall sonic palette is punishing, aiming to overwhelm listeners rather than invite casual engagement. This approach fits squarely into the war metal ethos, which emphasizes raw intensity, nihilistic themes, and a disregard for traditional songwriting polish. Lyrically, Revenge often draws on motifs of hatred, destruction, and anti-religious sentiment. While the band doesn't always provide lyric sheets, the track titles and occasional discernible lines give hints of misanthropy and apocalyptic visions. On Behold Total Rejection, the sense of hostility is further amplified by the album's pacing and structure. Many tracks are short, rarely exceeding 3 or 4 minutes, but within that time, the band manages to pack in an exhaustive barrage of riffs and tempo changes. There's little build-up or mid-tempo respite. Instead, the music erupts at full speed and generally remains unrelenting until the song's abrupt conclusion. One aspect that fans and critics often debate is the production style. Behold Total Rejection opts for a dense, lo-fi mix that can feel overwhelming or muddy on first listen. Yet for many listeners, this is precisely the point. The album seeks to create an aural onslaught that mirrors the grim and violent themes. Revenge engages with. By refusing to clean up the guitars or dial back on the explosive drum tracks, the band maintains the sense that the music is teetering on the edge of complete collapse. This approach, while polarizing, has become a hallmark on the war metal subgenre. It sets Revenge apart from more polished acts, emphasizing an almost primal ferocity that has garnered them a loyal following. Historically, war metal finds its roots in earlier bands like Blasphemy, also Canadian, Barrett from Finland, and other groups that merged the rawness of early black metal with the crushing sonic weight of death metal. Revenge's formation can be seen as an extension of that lineage. In the years since their debut, they've continued to refine, or depending on perspective, intensify their style rather than broaden it. Each album is a statement of unwavering dedication to sonic barbarity, and Behold Total Rejection stands out for pushing that commitment to new extremes. Reactions to the album have varied. Longtime devotees of underground metal view it as a pinnacle of war metal aggression, pointing to its unremitting force as proof that Revenge remains among the most brutal acts in the scene. Others find it inaccessible or too hostile in its disregard for nuanced songwriting and clarity in production. But as is often the case with the genre, the polarization is part of its identity. Behold Total Rejection is not designed for mainstream appeal or casual listening. It's an intentionally abrasive work that tests the limits of what can be called music, while still retaining enough structure to differentiate individual tracks. In the broader context of extreme metal, Behold Total Rejection further cements Revenge's reputation for unwavering hostility and unfiltered aggression. James Reed's dedication to war metal's foundational values, speed, darkness, and chaos, resonates with a global network of fans who seek the most intense forms of music available. Whether viewed as a standout in a long career or simply another notch in the band's ever-growing catalog of violent noise, it remains a core release that exemplifies what Revenge is all about. Ultimately, the album's title says it all. This is a sonic statement of complete repudiation of moderation, compromise, or mainstream acceptance. For those inclined to look into the abyss of extreme metal, Behold Total Rejection is both a challenge and a milestone. Kazumoto Endo is a prominent figure in the Japanese noise scene, which gained international attention in the 1990s for its audacious experimentation and boundary-pushing sounds. Often aligned with other extreme artists like Merzbow, Masona, and Obe, Endo cultivated a reputation for creating frantic, cut-up noise pieces that veer between blistering harshness and surprising moments of sonic detail. While he has recorded under several monikers, most famously Killer Bug, the works under his own name tend to be more eclectic, weaving together blasts of static, abrupt dynamic shifts, and sporadic samples in a manner that feels both chaotic and carefully orchestrated. Released in the early 2000s, While You Were Out is a cornerstone of Endo's discography, exemplifying his signature approach to noise composition. Rather than simply burying the listener under unrelenting distortion, Endo rapidly switches from intense swells of feedback to near silences punctuated by electronic screeches and unexpected tonal loops. This jump cut style keeps listeners on edge, never allowing them to settle in any one texture for too long. It's an approach that calls attention to the physicality of noise, as if each shift in frequency or volume were yanking the audience in a new direction. One defining element of Japanese noise during the era was the rejection of traditional musical structures, a concept that While You're Out takes to extremes. Endo works with found sounds, heavily processed electronics, and unpredictable sample techniques that collide in a disorienting collage. At times, you may catch faint traces of recognizable audio, like a distorted voice or fleeting melody, before they're swallowed up by blasts of static. This fleeting familiarity can make the sudden onslaught of noise all the more jarring. In a live context, Endo was known for high-energy performances that mirrored the chaos of his recordings. The same sense of spontaneity translates onto While You Were Out, giving it an organic, almost improvisational quality. Though thoroughly abrasive, it's also constructed with an ear for detail, rewarding listeners who pay close attention to the layers of sound. With each track, Endo seems to be testing how far he can push the boundaries of signal manipulation, whether through filtering, pitch shifts, or unexpected volume spikes. Critics and fans of the genre often point to While You're Out as a prime example of Japanese noise at its most frantic. While it may not attract those seeking melody or straightforward rhythm, it has become a reference point for the cut-up style, an approach that heavily influenced later noise and experimental electronic artists, both in Japan and abroad. In many ways, the album underscores the cultural shift in underground music during the late 20th and early 21st centuries, when technology and a do-it-yourself ethos empowered creators to explore ever more extreme forms of sound. For newcomers to noise, While You're Out can be an overwhelming initiation, but its impact lies in precisely that. It stands as a full-throttle challenge to the listener's expectations of what music should be. By turning dissonance, abrupt edits, and unpredictable surges into art, Kazumoto Endo continues to push the evolution of noise, and this album remains a testament to that relentless pursuit of new sonic frontiers. Make a Change, Kill Yourself is a Danish solo project formed by Yeleng Borgaz, who has also helmed other black metal acts like Angaztir. Rooted in the depressive suicidal black metal subgenre, this self-titled release, often cited as the band's debut, quickly became a notable entry in a scene defined by bleak atmospheres, dissonant chords, and vocal performances laced with despair. While typical black metal emphasizes aggression and raw production, DSBM shifts the focus towards slower tempos and emotionally charged expressions of melancholy, something this album exemplifies from start to finish. Clocking in at lengths that far exceed conventional song structures, each track plunges the listener into a world of repetitive riffs, anguished screams, and sparse percussion. The intentional sense of monotony highlights the thematic weight. The music seems to linger on each moment of sorrow, mirroring the introspective darkness at the heart of DSBM. Instead of purely chaotic blast beats or shrieking guitars, there's a measured approach that allows the crushing atmosphere to fully envelop the listener. Lyrically, the album centers on the struggles of existence, hopelessness, and self-destruction, common motifs in depressive black metal, but given a personal intensity here through Yeleng Borgaz's solitary vision. Production-wise, it maintains a lo-fi quality that accentuates the rawness of the material. The guitars are drenched in distortion, but never to the point of pure noise. Instead, they drone on repetitively, drawing out each note to create a hypnotic effect. The vocals alternate between distant wails and tortured screams, reinforcing the isolating atmosphere. This sense of isolation is further emphasized by minimalistic use of keyboards and additional instrumentation. When subtle ambient elements do appear, they serve more as an echo of despair rather than any reprieve from the gloom. Historically, the album arrived at a time when the DSBM scene was gaining traction internationally. Artists like Zasthur, Leviathan, and Shining had already made ripples, but Make a Change, Kill Yourself felt especially stark in its presentation. Its extended song lengths and unwavering focus on desolation resonated with those looking for an even deeper dive into the nihilistic corners of black metal. Some listeners found the unrelenting negativity difficult to endure, while others praised it for fully capturing the essence of depression in sonic form. Beyond its immediate impact, Make a Change, Kill Yourself remains relevant in discussions of how black metal can stretch the boundaries of what music can express emotionally. Rather than offering any semblance of release or hope, it immerses the audience in a sustained meditation on despair, leaving them to confront that uncomfortable space without distraction. For those exploring the more extreme fringes of the black metal spectrum, and especially the distinct anguish that defines DSBM, this record is often regarded as essential listening, emblematic of an artist wholly committed to channeling personal torment into a stark, immersive soundscape. Illusion of Safety is an experimental music project founded in Chicago in the mid-1980s, primarily spearheaded by multi-instrumentalist and sound artist Daniel Burke. Over the years, the collective's lineup has shifted, but it consistently attracts collaborators keen on exploring the boundaries between ambient, drone, noise, industrial, and electroacoustic composition. A hallmark of Illusion of Safety's work is the blending of found sounds, field recordings, and manipulated electronics, which create dense soundscapes that can range from meditative to outright unsettling. Bad Karma stands out as one of the project's more challenging releases, capturing a period in the early 1990s when Illusion of Safety was evolving from raw industrial textures towards more nuanced sonic collages. The album often employs slow-building passages where sparse tones and minimal rhythms gradually morph into abrasive crescendos. You might hear moments of near silence broken by unexpected bursts of static or metal clanging, an approach that reflects the group's interest in playing with listeners' perception and emotional tension. One notable aspect of Bad Karma is the interplay between organic and synthetic elements. Field recordings, sometimes manipulated beyond recognition, intersect with layers of electronic drones, creating a listening experience where you're never quite sure what's real and what's processed. This uncertainty is part of Illusion of Safety's overarching aesthetic, to provoke contemplation about the nature of sound and how it can be recontextualized. Lyrical or vocal content is almost non-existent, which places the focus squarely on the textural qualities of the music. Instead of melodic hooks, the album relies on atmosphere and carefully structured noise. In certain stretches, the sonic environment feels almost serene, only to be ruptured by distortion or sudden shifts in frequency. The effect is simultaneously hypnotic and disorienting, a signature technique in the band's catalog. Though not widely recognized in mainstream circles, Bad Karma is often cited by experimental music enthusiasts as notable entries in early American electroacoustic and industrial-tinged noise. Critics who have encountered the album appreciate its commitment to pushing boundaries, forging a path that's neither strictly ambient nor outright industrial, but something in between. It's a work that challenges passive listening, demanding attention to the subtle interplay of tones and the underlying tensions that underscore each track. For those exploring Illusion of Safety's discography, Bad Karma serves as both a snapshot of the group's sonic evolution and a statement on their broader artistic goals. It exemplifies an approach that values unpredictability, abstraction, and the psychological resonance of extreme sound manipulation. If you're looking to dive deeper into the world of experimental audio collage, Bad Karma is a compelling place to start, a testament to the ways in which noise, drone, and found sound can be combined to create art that unsettles as much as it intrigues. Harry Pussy was a noise rock trio formed in the early 1990s in Miami, Florida. Core members include Bill Orcutt on guitar and Adris Hoyos on drums and vocals. Occasionally, additional collaborators would join the lineup, but Orcutt and Hoyos were the consistent driving force behind the band's short, explosive, and often chaotic sound. Drawing from the aesthetics of no-wave, free improvisation, and hardcore punk, Harry Pussy became notorious for their confrontational performances and jarring sonic approach. The band's self-titled album, sometimes referred to as their debut, dropped in 1993 on the Still Breeze label. At first listen, it can come across as purely discordant noise, screeching guitars, barely structured drum patterns, and vocals that often blur into raw screams. Yet beneath this seems disorder. Harry Pussy set out to challenge the conventions of rock music by dismantling typical song structures and pushing the boundaries of volume and speed. Their tracks rarely follow a verse-chorus formula, opting instead for abrupt starts and stops that leave listeners in a state of tension, unsure of what might come next. From a historical standpoint, Harry Pussy emerged during a period when underground music scenes across the United States were fragmenting into increasingly specialized subgenres. No wave and noise rock had already taken root in cities like New York and Chicago, and Harry Pussy brought their own interpretation of these styles to Miami. Though geographically distant from those established hubs, they contributed to the broader tapestry of experimental music, inspiring later generations of artists who looked to combine the aggression of punk with the free-form spontaneity of avant-garde jazz and noise. A significant part of the album's character lies in the distinctive guitar style of Bill Orcutt. He used a 4-string guitar setup that embraced atonality, producing jagged chords and squealing slides. Meanwhile, Adris Hoyos' drumming and vocal outbursts added an unpredictable edge, as she frequently chose to attack the kit in short, frenzied blasts, rather than holding down a steady beat. This interplay created music that felt volatile, as though it could collapse into silence or erupt into a flurry of distortion at any moment. Harry Pussy isn't polished by any measure. The production is raw, leaving in every feedback spike and accidental clang. For many users, that rawness is what makes the album stand out. There's a sense that you're hearing a live band pushing their physical and musical limits, unfiltered by studio techniques. Though it didn't receive mainstream success, the record became a cult classic among fans of extreme and experimental music. It showcased how minimalistic instrumentation, used in an unpredictable way, could yield striking sonic results. Today, the album remains a touchstone for those exploring the more abrasive corners of rock's underground. It's not easy listening, and it's definitely not for everyone. But for those interested in the evolution of American noise rock, Harry Pussy's self-titled release stands as a vital artifact. It captures the band's unrestrained creativity and raw energy, serving as a key influence on countless noise and avant-garde groups that would follow. Masona is the moniker of a Japanese noise artist, Yamazaki Maso Takushi, a prolific and influential figure in the country's underground noise scene since the mid-1980s. The name is often explained as a fusion of Maso, short for masochist, and Onna, the Japanese word for woman, though Masona is also sometimes referred to as Mademoiselle Anne. Regardless of the exact etymology, the project's aesthetic is firmly rooted in extremes, uncompromising sonic violence, rapid-fire changes in texture, and a high-energy, often confrontational performance style. By the time Spectrum Ripper was released in the mid to late 90s, Masona had already developed a cult reputation for brief explosive noise blasts and unpredictable live shows. In concert, Yamazaki frequently threw himself into his sets, employing an incredible minimal setup, usually just a microphone, a few distortion pedals, and a mixer. His body movements often matched the music's violence, with feedback loops and vocal manipulations building to overwhelming climaxes within seconds. This sense of physical abandon is reflected in Spectrum Ripper, which many listeners consider one of his definitive works. Clocking in at around 15 minutes total, Spectrum Ripper is remarkably short for an album, yet it manages to feel relentlessly intense. Rather than rely on slow builds or extended tracks, Masona packs each song with jarring bursts of distortion and guttural vocalizations, sometimes lasting under a minute before transitioning to the next sonic assault. The rapid-fire approach underscores Masona's cut-up sensibility, aligning him with other pioneers of the Japanese explosion, like Merzbow and Incapacitants, yet still carving out a distinctive niche through his concentration on dynamic vocal aggression. The production on Spectrum Ripper is deliberately raw, capturing the sense of total overload. Frequent shifts in pitch and volume hit the ear with little warning, so it feels as though the album is perpetually on the verge of sonic collapse. One moment the mix might drop to near silence, only to burst seconds later in a maelstrom of feedback, shrieks, and inhuman screams. This unpredictable structure can make for a disorienting experience, but it also compels the listener to remain hyper-attentive. In that sense, Spectrum Ripper mirrors Masona's live sets, brief and volatile, challenging any sense of comfort. In the broader context of Japanese noise, Masona stands out for his focus on immediacy. While other artists in the genre may create sprawling layered walls of sound, Masona condenses that intensity into rapid, visceral punches. The album's brevity and chaotic sequencing can even be seen as a radical statement, eschewing typical album formats in favor of something that burns white-hot for a short duration. This approach influenced subsequent genres of noise and grindcore musicians who sought to capture similar levels of intensity in similarly small windows of time. Historically, Spectrum Ripper arrived at a moment when Japanese noise was garnering more attention in underground circles abroad. International labels, fanzines, and trademark networks had begun to shine a spotlight on the most extreme corners of experimental music, and Masona's release found a ready audience of enthusiasts hungry for uncompromising sound. While Spectrum Ripper may not have the mainstream name recognition of more conventional albums, it remains a key reference point for those exploring the most abrasive edges of noise and avant-garde sound art. In many ways, the record encapsulates Masona's entire ethos: relentless experimentation, extreme brevity, and an abiding interest in testing the limits of both performer and listener. It's a baptism by fire for anyone new to harsh noise, but also a vital listen for anyone who wants to understand the depths and diversity of Japan's noise renaissance. If you can survive the onslaught, Spectrum Ripper has a surprising amount to reveal about the power of pure sonic energy and the role of performance in pushing that energy to its absolute brink. The Nihilist Spasm Band hails from London, Ontario, Canada, and formed in the mid-1960s, an era when the musical landscape was dominated by British invasion rock, folk revival, and the tail end of early rock and roll. But while other groups chased conventional songwriting and radio play, the Nihilist Spasm Band pursued a path completely their own, consisting of Bill Exley, Greg Corno, Hugh McIntyre, John Boyle, Murray Favreau, John Clement, and other rotating contributors, they developed a style around free improvisation, homemade or heavily modified instruments, and a deliberate disregard for traditional structures in rock music. From the start, they adhered to a sort of anti-music ethos, which is one reason they were labeled a noise band long before noise as a genre had truly coalesced. Their instruments included electric kazoos, altered guitars, and all manner of contraptions put together or modified by the members themselves. While some noise bands leaned on electronic gadgets and extreme volume for shock value, the nihilist Spasm Band took a more idiosyncratic approach, embracing dissonance, unpredictable rhythms, and an open-ended sense of composition. In live performances, the group was, and still is, known for diving headlong into improvised sets that could range from playful and comedic to outright chaotic, with Bill Exley often delivering absurd or monotone vocal proclamations on top of the racket. Their 1968 release, No Record, quickly became a cult favorite in underground circles, capturing the essence of their radical improvisation on vinyl. Recorded without any adherence to standard songwriting, the album delivers a barrage of feedback, clanging percussion, and sporadic vocal interjections. There are moments where you can almost hear the group collectively feeling out a groove, only for it to dissolve seconds later into a swirl of distorted guitar and kazoo squeals. This unpredictability is a cornerstone of their aesthetic. Nothing about the band's music is planned or rehearsed. Instead, the performers feed off of one another's energy, starting a chain reaction of sound that can evolve in real time. For context, this was happening around the same time psychedelic rock and early electronic experimentation were making waves elsewhere. Yet the nihilist Spasm Band stood apart from these movements by eschewing even the idea of composition. If psychedelia expanded rock's consciousness through cosmic jams, No Record pointed to an alternative universe where any semblance of typical musicality was abandoned altogether. The emphasis was on a collective improv and a willingness to let go of typical musical constraints. Pitch, harmony, and even steady tempo were all negotiable or outright ignored. Historically, No Record predates many of the industrial noise acts that would come to prominence in the late 70s and early 80s. In that sense, the album serves as a predecessor to the clamor of future experimental subgenres. While groups of places like New York and Chicago would soon emerge with no wave and experimental rock scenes, the nihilist Spasm Band had already staked out territory as far back as the mid-1960s. They were making free-form noise in a vacuum, well outside the major cultural centers that might have instantly embraced or documented them. The geographic isolation arguably helped them cultivate a unique approach, free from the prevailing trends and aesthetic rules that might have hemmed in a more traditional ensemble. Though No Record was never destined for mainstream radio play, it remained an important artifact of avant-garde music. The album's raw energy and lack of conventional structure can be startling to new listeners, yet for those willing to explore its labyrinth of clashing sounds, it offers a window into how far early experimenters were willing to go. It challenges the very concept of what an album should be. Rather than providing curated, repeatable songs, it's a capture of unrehearsed, unfiltered creativity, complete with its flaws, quirks, and flashes of inspired communal improvisation. Decades later, the nihilist Spasm Band continues to garner respect from noise artists, free improv enthusiasts, and collectors of rare experimental vinyl. They've also maintained a tradition of performing weekly gigs in their hometown for many years, further solidifying their legend as a band that never gave up on its initial vision, no matter how unorthodox. For anyone exploring the genealogy of noise and freeform music, No Record stands as a testament to DIY ethics, sonic risk-taking, and a genuine fascination with the unbridled possibilities of pure improvisation. Van Leet Folk is a Swedish outfit that formed in the early 2010s, carving out a unique space in the experimental electronic and electronic body music scenes. Their name, which translates to ordinary people, stands in stark contrast to the decidedly unordinary sound they produce. The group's work often features repetitive, pulsing rhythms, confrontational vocals, and a sly infusion of traditional or folk motifs, elements that set them apart from more straightforward electronic acts. While their lineup has shifted at times, key members remain committed to blending dance floor intensity with off-kilter experimentation, creating an aesthetic that feels both familiar and unsettling. Their album Hambo takes its title from a traditional Swedish folk dance, a reference that's no coincidence. Van Leet Folk has a penchant for interpreting Nordic culture through an electronic lens. On paper, the idea of merging an old folk dance form with gritty electronic beats might sound unconventional. In practice, though, the band leverages this clash to craft music that is intentionally jarring. Rapid-fire drum machines collide with simple melodic lines, often built around a hypnotic looping pattern reminiscent of older dance traditions, yet deconstructed and layered in such a way that feels more like a subversive commentary than a straightforward homage. Sonically, Hambo is driven by throbbing bass lines and minimal synth work, often joined by disembodied vocal snippets or half-shouted refrains. The vocals, when they appear, can alternate between deadpan narration and aggressive chanting, underscoring the album's stark atmosphere. Occasionally, Van Folk sprinkles in samples hinting at pastoral or folk motifs, perhaps a stray fiddle phrase or a melodic fragment, only to bury them under layers of distortion and mechanical percussion. The result is a duality. An archaic dance form meets a punishing modern sound design, which can be both hypnotic and disorienting. Lyrically, the group's themes often revolve around everyday frustrations, social pressures, and a sense of cultural dissonance. Though many of the lyrics are in Swedish, even non-Swedish speakers can pick up the raw emotional tone. There's a certain tension between sardonic humor and bleak introspection running through each track. This tension aligns well with the album's overall vibe. Each piece pushes electronic music to claustrophobic extremes while still retaining that faint echo of something older, an uneasy bridge between folk tradition and contemporary alienation. From a production standpoint, Hambo strikes a careful balance between the rough edges of DIY electronics and a polished, club-ready undercurrent. Percussive sequences snap into place with a precision that almost dares you to dance, yet the layered distortion and abrupt transitions suggest an aversion to any easy conventional groove. The pacing too can feel off-kilter, as if the band delights in keeping listeners slightly out of step, mirroring the way a Hambo dance might become distorted if one partner suddenly starts moving to a totally different rhythm. In the broader experimental music landscape, Van Folk's willingness to poke at cultural touchstones while embracing repetitive, body-focused electronics has garnered them a cult following. They've performed at underground festivals dedicated to avant-garde electronic music, while also attracting those curious about how traditional influences can manifest in modern sonic forms. Although Hambo may not be widely known outside niche circles, it remains emblematic of a band unafraid to fuse heritage with harsh textures. For those looking to dive deeper into the weirder side of Scandinavian electronics, Hambo stands as a striking example of what can happen when folk culture meets dissonant industrial-tinged EBM head-on. The album's unsettling yet strangely danceable quality makes it both an intriguing listen and a testament to Van Folk's knack for provocation. If you're searching for music that hovers between tradition and experimentation, between hypnotic groove and outright discord, then Hambo is a must-hear step into uncharted territory. Lustmord is a long-running project of Welsh musician and sound engineer Brian Williams, often regarded as one of the pioneers of the dark ambient genre. Emerging in the early 1980s, Lustmord has consistently pushed the limits of atmospheric and minimalistic music, moving away from traditional instrumentation towards unsettling soundscapes composed of drones, field recordings, and carefully sculpted electronic processing. Over the years, Williams has collaborated with a diverse range of artists, including SPK, Clock DVA, and even Maynard James Keegan of Tool, but Lustmord remains primarily his personal vision. Released in 1990 on the label Side Effects, Heresy stands as a cornerstone in dark ambient history. At a time when industrial music was more prominently associated with harsh electronics and rhythmic clatter, Heresy steered towards something more ominous and spacious. Instead of brash percussion or distorted vocals, the album focuses on slow-moving waves of sound that evoke subterranean caverns or forgotten crypts. Its eerie atmosphere is achieved through layering low-frequency drones, sparse echoes, and unsettling found sounds, creating a palpable sense of tension. The overall effect is claustrophobic and deeply immersive. One of the most distinctive aspects of Heresy is its use of field recordings. While Brian Williams has not always elaborated on precisely where these recordings were captured, rumors and anecdotes suggest he collected source sounds in crypts, caves, and other resonant spaces. Whether literal or apocryphal, these stories reinforce the idea that the album's resonance isn't merely an effect of studio processing, but rather an artistic effort to harness the natural reverberations of unique environments. The result is an audio experience where echoes hang in the air and distant rumbling frequencies feel like they're emanating from deep within the earth. Critically, Heresy earned a reputation as an album that not only defines Lustmord's style, but also helped shape an entire subgenre. Future dark ambient artists drew inspiration from its melding of sonic minimalism, unsettling drones, and immersive reverberation. It took ambient music's capacity for atmosphere and introduced an element of existential dread, largely absent from the more ethereal sounds popularized by artists like Brian Eno. This darker strain found traction with fans of industrial, gothic, and doom metal, uniting a variety of listeners in their fascination with foreboding sonic terrain. By prioritizing texture and mood above all else, Heresy remains a touchstone for those interested in how far ambient music can be stretched into the territory of the macabre. For anyone looking to understand the evolution of dark ambient or to see how Lustmord's work influenced later artists and sound designers, Heresy is essential. It's not built on riffs or melodies, but on the sensation of being enveloped by an otherworldly presence, an effect that has kept the album relevant and evocative decades after its original release. And that concludes our exploration of Tier 6. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into some of the most unsettling, abstract, and thought-provoking albums we've encountered so far. I know it hasn't been easy. The themes and sounds here can be overwhelming, but facing these challenging works often reveals just how limitless artistic expression can be. As we move forward, get ready. The iceberg only grows deeper and more uncompromising from here. You can expect even more boundary-pushing sounds and raw emotions in the tiers to come. If you're new to the series or if you want to revisit earlier tiers, you can find them all in the playlist linked below. Before you go, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing if you found this journey worthwhile. Your support helps the channel grow and tells me you're up for continuing this descent into the depths of experimental music. I'm Squishy, and I've been your guide through these strange sonic realms. Thank you again for your time, curiosity, and willingness to confront some of music's most difficult corners with me. Remember to take care of yourself. It's perfectly fine to step away and process what you've heard. Music, at its most challenging, can still illuminate new perspectives on ourselves in our world. Until next time, stay squishy.